Welcome to God with George Ortega and Joshua Bond. This is episode number 40. And for those of you who know the Bible, 40 is a very significant number. It was the number of the days that Moses was on Mount Sinai. It was the number of the years that the Israelites were in the desert. A lot of 40s there. All right, so we're recording this on Tuesday, December 15th at 3:04 p.m. Eastern time. And we're like, this series now is about our basically creating an outline for a book. We explained the last episode, and here's where we are. The first question we started with is, why are we writing this book? So like one is like, and I'll just briefly summarize what we've done so far. Then we could like expand to other ideas. Okay, we want to unify the planet's consciousness of God. We want, instead of like, you have all these different kind of religions have different understandings of God. Some religions don't even understand that God must exist. So we want to try to like have a collective human understanding that yes, God exists and God exists in a certain way. We've mentioned that, we want to disavow people of the belief in free will because it's so harmful in so many ways. Just, evolving beyond it can create a much, much better world very, very quickly. All right, so we want to, if not completely unite the world's experiences, at least start a conversation where they're talking with each other about their beliefs, to try to ultimately reach a consensus. We want to unite the spiritual with the mundane. We also want to unite science and religion, or just show that they're more like each other than they're apart. Basically, we want to mobilize a shift to a new global consciousness, and part of that is like, it's probably the major part of the book is we want to encourage virtue. We want to encourage people to behave better, to be better, by their more accurate understanding of God. And there's four areas, the four great sins that I refer to: animal abuse, abortion, climate change, and global poverty. So hopefully we can address those, finally. And lastly on my list, we want to shift, this is important, we want to shift from religions believing what they believe because some guy says this is so, to believing what we believe because it makes sense, because reason bears it out, because science bears it out. And that's, because like without that, then, it's our world, our modern world has shown us that we need to make this shift. All right, so Josh, so we have now just gone through what we went through in last episode. So again, why are we writing this book? What is it we intend to do? And actually, why don't you start off with, I'm wondering if we can blend, because we were talking about technology and God. I'm wondering if we can blend that into, a reason we're doing the book.
Sure, George. Let me see if I can tie some of those together. We talked last episode about this problem with believing that some prophet, has a right, and what it is divine in such a way that no matter what they said, it's true, has to be true. And this carries over to scripture, that texts are holy, no matter how many times they've been translated to different languages, right? So part of this is getting this new awareness that religion does evolve. Religion evolves. Our concept of God evolves. How we understand God, how we interact with God, this all evolves, and we have to accept this. And so many religions just fall flat on their face with this. A lot of religions don't even believe in evolutionary theory, period, but much less these forms of cultural evolution and the evolution of consciousness, right? So once you accept that, then you can start asking yourself, okay, I have this understanding kind of how religions worship God or believe in God and their worldview in the past. And I accept that mine is different now. Our current church or denomination or whatever is different now. What's that going to look like in the future, right? And so this is where technology comes into play, because technology is completely, revolutionizing our lives. and even religions and how we experience religions, how we experience ourselves, everything, from virtual reality to medicine and supplements that make your brain work better or work differently or let you experience altered, shifted states of consciousness that give you more compassion, empathy, and insight. These are all technologies, right? Even tying it together a little further is these illusions that we talk about, this illusion of free will. Well, understanding that will or human behavior is a technology that has to be developed and cultivated by the culture over time. So that's where the virtue comes in. So it's not just encouraging people to be more virtuous, it's actually empowering virtue that literally, uh, by the laws of nature and physics, that person, before accessing that technology of self transformation, could not have been virtuous, could not have physically, mentally, psychologically made a different choice than the choice they made.
Yeah, that's a great point. One of the harms that free will belief does is it confuses us so that we're trying to be virtuous and we're not. A perfect example, a lot of rich people who believe they're trying to do the right thing by not helping the poor because they sincerely believe that because the poor have a free will, the poor don't deserve their help. The poor, are responsible for their plight. So again, that leads to a lot of greed and selfishness. This mistaken belief in free will. So absolutely, we definitely have to do sections on that. Okay, so let's see. So why are we writing this book? Now we're reaching, I mean, we may be getting toward the end of this particular section, but let's just see if we can reach a bit more, see what we can find.
One thing that came to mind when you were talking about the four virtues I think you considered is I thought of
Four sins.
the four sins is I thought of the four traditional seven deadly sins, in Christianity. I mean, it has, earlier, I think, antecedents and similarities in other religions also have that kind of concept, but it's lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, pride. And so how do we, uh, does that relate at all? I mean, I think it does. I think, or are we going to update those? Or the thing I think the previous religions did was kind of demonize the self. They were, what now would we should consider self-hate religions, even anti-human philosophies. But that doesn't mean that they were back then, right? Because they evolved out of scarcity. And if, somebody made just a slight mistake with gluttony, that meant the whole tribe starved and went out of existence, right? Now we have unlimited abundance. And now through psychology, we're learning that, how people feel about themselves because of this concept of self can actually cause them to commit these sins, right? So when we reform this idea of the self and consciousness and free will, then that will, relieve them of a lot of depression, anxiety, feelings that cause different sins, wrath, pride, envy, different things.
That's a great point. I mean, a lot of people don't believe in God, don't believe that God is caring for them. They live in fear. And when they live in fear, they're more prone to conduct acts that we would deem immoral, So yeah, Josh, I think what you're saying, so we need to gain a better understanding of what's good and what's evil so that we can do much more good, do much less evil. And so we need to weave that into how does a more accurate understanding of God create this more accurate understanding of morality? It's excellent.
One thing I definitely would like to explore is if we go on this list of the seven deadly sins: lust, gluttony, greed, sloth, wrath, envy, pride, none of those are are conducive to evaluate, examining institutions, how institutions are structured, right? These are all something you project on an individual. And how my religions that I've been through kind of coped with that, or justified it, was like, oh well, it's the humans in the institutions that are evil, they're being prideful or envious, and they're any evil in the institution. The institutions almost became infallible, is almost calling them God is blasphemy, in a sense, that says the institutions are above reproach, when I think we should have much higher expectations for our institutions. And when we do that, the humans that they produce will be much more virtuous and happy.
Excellent point. So another reason we're doing the book, we want to change our world's institutions, our economic institutions, criminal justice, education, across the board. I mean, they're good, they are good, they serve humanity in many ways, but in many ways they've become outdated and actually even dangerous. I mean, the institution of business, economics now, is threatening our future with the climate and all. So, we have to just, in other words, like our institutions in the past, especially with business, like it was about maximum personal freedom at the expense of collective concerns. Now we're in a situation, where we need to address the collective, and so like the individual prerogatives become less important. So again, that's excellent. We need to change. Now the question, again, the challenge in all these, because like this is, we definitely want to weave these into the narrative, but our challenge is going to be, how does a more accurate understanding of God lead to the shift in these institutions?
Yeah, so that would connect to the last episode more, where we talked about bringing God and spirituality back into these institutions, right? And it's almost like we had this form of God and spirituality that was only critical of the individual, the self, that deserved to go to hell. We don't think of a corporation should go to hell, but we think of a child is destined to go to hell if they don't accept some form of salvation by the time they grow up, right? But when really, so much of the evil is committed is caused by the inherent structure of the institutions, and they're set up to cause human beings to commit evil.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you bring God into everybody's consciousness more, then that consciousness has to become part of corporations, of the institution of business and the other institutions. So so yeah, that's something we can all look forward to. All right. So what else? So like, why are we writing this book?
I mean, happiness is a big thing we haven't touched on, and particularly, I think one part of that, or how it ties in, is virtuous happiness and morality. That you know people who are deprived of happiness through systemic oppression, through various mechanisms that could very easily be reformed, at minimal cost, they are prone much more to commit sin, quote unquote sin, or even before you look at that, the morality aspect, they're just not going to perform well. They're not going to feed back into society. They're not going to be productive. They're going to, create that evil welfare state that, the right likes to demonize, right? But just a little bit of tweaking of the system, can have major shifts in happiness. And that actually is one of the best approaches to creating virtue and morality.
Yeah, I mean, you basically mentioned the primary reason we're writing the book. We're writing the book to create a happier world, and that's essentially what everything we do is most fundamentally about. But it's important to keep this in mind, because one of the major problems with religions of today, they forget this. They're so focused on morality and ritual and learning and all these things that are beneficial, but to the extent that people don't, have a keen awareness of why they're alive, what's most valuable to all of us, then that definitely needs to be addressed. So let's see, you mentioned something else, create a happier world. Oh, one thing that like, all right, why are we writing this book? Because truth matters. Because we not only enjoy understanding the truth of how things are, understanding truths help us immeasurably in countless ways. So again, it's just with science. A lot of science is not practical. It's what's the word? It's just basic science. It's like science not to get to a certain goal or point beyond understanding something. So again, like, these these initiatives we've been outlining are extremely important. But, learning, we enjoy learning. This relates to our idea of happiness. We enjoy discovering truths, understanding truths. So that's definitely going to be one of the major themes, I guess. We want to kind of like have this book be an enjoyable learning experience for people.
Yeah, George. We like learning new things and novelty, um, and I think that's a part of the book. Going to be a part of the book is one part of it is, we like it, especially if there's not a lot of risk or it doesn't challenge our deeply held beliefs or push on our own personal traumas that we've experienced. But I think part of what we'll be doing is going through the material in such a way that makes that an easy, gentle process, right, of spiritual growth, right? And I think that's a really crucial part, especially obviously with this illusion of free will, because, so many religions and their views of God as being only good and humans being the cause of evil, has created a dark, deep, collective unconscious and, collective shadow in all of us where, I understand why when you start to introduce this idea of the illusion of free will to religious people, they have a visceral or a negative response, because their identity is that they are better because they've accepted a religion and a version of God that makes them better, and they take credit or pride for that, and that's their identity. We all need to have a sense of identity and self-worth.
Excellent. All right. And then, I mean, one thing I got from that is that our identity, like especially in Christianity, yeah, in Judaism also, I'm like the Adam and Eve story, that we're basically like, we sometimes see ourselves as sinners, and like relative to overcoming this belief in free will, to understand that God's will is the only will, that really grants us absolution. So like, another reason we're writing this book, to absolve humanity of our sins, of our crimes. We've conducted, crimes immemorially. I mean, like, and it's not like we don't need to understand that and be better, but that process of becoming better people is empowered and better enabled when we don't blame ourselves fundamentally for our evil. So certainly, again, we want to mobilize a collective absolution, so we see ourselves as innocent.
Yeah, George, I mean, this issue of the self is just so important, and self-concept, right? And it's there's no agreement in religions. In the East, for instance, they have, in Hinduism and Buddhism, they have the same word Atman for the self, but it means two completely different things. Where the Buddhist perspective is more that there is no self, and the Hindu perspective is closer to the Christian or the Judeo-Christian version concept, or I should say the Western idea of the self, that's largely entrenched in this denial of the illusion of free will, and very condemnatory, and projecting.
Yeah, and I mean, you just reminded me, like, so at least, Hinduism is theistic, it's polytheistic. It's Buddhism that, according to the Buddha, um, I don't, there may be some denominations, sects of Buddhism, that believe in a deity, but I think for the most part, the philosophy is not not atheistic in that God doesn't exist, but non-theistic in that they don't delve into that. So now, among the world's religions, I have profound appreciation of Buddhism, because it's so much more evolved than the other four religions in terms of, like, oh God, the experience of spirituality, the experience of divine. I mean, Buddhists, a lot of them are vegan, vegetarian. They tend to value compassion. They're very peaceful people. And so,
And I think they, real quick, I think one value to me is they have one of the most accurate understandings of what consciousness is that matches our modern science, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely, because they have, and especially in Tibetan Buddhism, their tradition is that of exploration. And the Buddha, himself said, like, don't, accept what I say because I said it. Test it out, experience it. So you're right. I mean, Buddhists are very highly evolved in a lot of areas, and I mean, it would be great to encourage within their religion the understanding, the logical understanding within their framework and their tradition that yes, even though Buddha didn't talk about God, um, it may be time for them to begin this conversation. And considering the success they've had with our basic consciousness and meditation and peacefulness and compassion, I would expect that they may be at the forefront of this global reformation of our consciousness about God.
Yeah, I mean, Buddhism is not as factions or schism or diverse as Hinduism, certainly, or Christianity. It's much more uniform, but still there's a wide variety. And I kind of like to think of the wisdom of it as, through meditation, contemplation, let's figure out as much as we can about consciousness first before we make assumptions about God is this or God wants that. And it seems to largely, be effective when you consider all of the false notions of God that have come into being through not doing that, not asking the question of what is consciousness, what is the self. So I think there is profound insight to it. And I don't think they're really, the Buddhists that I've sat with and talked with, they're, a lot of them are theists, and they may go to Western or Christian churches also to practice some of their theism, right? And I mean, Buddhism, I don't think is opposed to theism as an institutional dogmatic view or anything like that.
That's a great point. Yes, you can be a Buddhist and a Jew, a Buddhist and a Christian. So yeah, and that's to their benefit also. But again, like under that understanding, they're kind of like more of a philosophy than a religion. I think they really are, a religion because what they teach is so integral to what religion is about. It's again, it's a non-theistic religion, but they have some powerful understandings. Okay, what else? So like, why are we writing this book?
I think love and effective family dynamics, relationship dynamics, human relationship dynamics, right? I mean, so many families, my own family, myself, how the family relates, the family members usually end up blaming each other or blaming themselves, for the family not being good, when it's clearly that's just flawed logic when you understand all of sociology and psychology and all the different religious aspects of it, you know. So I think I said a few there, but relationship, human relationship, and love being two of them.
That's perfect. The way our lives play out is within the context of relationships and especially family relationships. So basically, the thesis, the hope and expectation is that as we get a clearer understanding of God, we will get a clearer understanding of ourselves and those around us and motivate and much more powerfully motivate the virtue that religions tend to historically try to cultivate in adherence, that we by understanding God, again, we can enhance family dynamics. Let's like, for example, like the divorce rate here in the United States is about 50%. That is like, so, we should, teach our kids to understand love better so they make wiser choices. We, you know, and and within families, yes, it's kind of like we as a human society have have not solved a lot of as many interpersonal problems as we could, because, on the one hand, we're not killing each other like we used to do in the Middle Ages and before that, we're a lot more peaceful than we used to be. But, that is the price for that has been that we just simply don't talk about things that really should be talked about. So like, to the extent that we talk about these things within the context of God, within the context of a more accurate understanding of God, then I think that can encourage us to have the conversations about enhancing relationships, that we need to have. And the last point is, like you mentioned, love. Okay, so like, this is kind of like, relative to happiness. I'm like, happiness is what our life is most about. And I believe that, there are different kinds of happiness, and a happiness that comes from love seems to be the highest form of happiness. So like, and love is about relationships.
Yeah, George. And again, tying it in, I don't understand how you could have any useful concept of love if you don't understand the illusion of free will, because, how can you love another human being when they do wrong or make a mistake if you feel like it's their fault? They chose to do that essentially, right?
Well,
The
I mean, no, Josh, I mean, I would like, there's a lot of that would be kind of like unconditional love in a sense. Like, for a lot of mothers will love their kids, regardless of how many people they kill and stuff, which is, it's love. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and grace, the concept of grace that's so prevalent in religions, understanding this illusion of free will and true causality and the true nature of God in this regard is just so profound, for reinforcing these feelings and desires for compassion, empathy, and grace.
All right. We got about a minute left. I think let's stop here. But Josh, you've been coming up with a lot of great ideas. That's excellent. So like, we're not done yet, because we, again, we'll be done when we're like, I'm asking the question, why are we writing this book? And nothing will come to either of our minds. Again, so this book may take about 1.5 years to write, which is fine, because like, I hope you're enjoying the exploration. So, all right. So thanks for watching. I guess this is Friday's episode. We'll be back, next Monday with again, just following up on what we left off on just outlining this book about God.
All right. Yeah. I'm really glad to be here and be doing this with George, and look forward to seeing how this all turns out. I think we're all learning a lot.
All right, we got 16 seconds left. We got like, why are we doing this? This is fun. Why are we writing?
Yeah, it needs to be done. I think it's the most important thing that could be done at this point in humanity. For
there
one.
You go. All right. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.